Alrighty, we are live. Raw Takes Live for the first time on Facebook Live, mixing it up. We've been on YouTube since the start of Raw Takes Live. Hope you're having a fantastic day with us here on Raw Takes Live. This is on Facebook Live this time, so I'm just looking around to see. It's a little bit of a different platform, still getting used to it. Didn't really do a good test run with this like I did YouTube, so but other than that, it's got a great platform here. Feel free to comment, like, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. This video will be on YouTube later on, but we're going to start it off here on Facebook. If you're joining us now, we really appreciate it. Welcome to Raw Takes Live for the first time on Facebook Live. This is on my personal page, shared to my Raw Takes page as well. But we don't need to get too much into the nitty-gritty of all that. Let's just get right down to business. Hope you're having a fantastic weekend so far. All right, so the Major League Baseball trade deadline has been the big story all week long. Big moves being made by all the teams before the deadline. A lot of folks are saying this has been the best trade deadline ever. If you're a Minnesota Twins fan, I'm sure you disagree with that. Seeing the fire sale the Minnesota Twins have, looks like they're just calling it a season overall. So I'll just give the Minnesota Twins the first F of the day if we're going to grade all the trade deadlines, because at the end of the day, they didn't really do anything to get better. The Toronto Blue Jays, though, we'll actually start in the American League. We'll go through some of the moves each of the teams made. I'll talk about which moves I like, which ones I don't, and how that fits in. Now, the Toronto Blue Jays, in my opinion, they have a huge opportunity here to really run away with the AL East. I don't see any team in the AL East, honestly, being able to compete with them unless Aaron Judge is healthy, and it's the New York Yankees. I don't think the Tampa Bay Rays are that good. I don't think the Boston Red Sox are great. I think they're okay. I don't think they're going to catch up and all of a sudden overtake the Toronto Blue Jays. I don't think that's happening. Baltimore Orioles, too far behind. Way too far behind. 10-plus games. That's not happening. So we got our first good morning, Heather Colbert-Hody. All right, good morning to you, Mom. Thank you very much for joining Raw Takes Live here on Facebook Live for the first time. All right. Let's talk about, back to the Toronto Blue Jays, though. Feel free to join in. Send a comment our way. We will love to hear from you right here on Raw Takes Live. This is an open platform, so please feel free to reach out if you have any opinions, comments, thoughts, or anything you want to talk about here on the show. That's what we're all about. Back to the Blue Jays, though. Let's start things off with their biggest move, and that involves the Cleveland Guardians trading for pitcher Shane Bieber, and they got Cal Steven in return if you're a Guardians fan. So Shane Bieber, now a Toronto Blue Jay. Based on how he looked in the minor leagues with his rehab starts, it looks like we're going to have good Shane Bieber back. I don't know if it's going to be vintage Shane Bieber, but good Shane Bieber, which for the Toronto Blue Jays is a big necessity. Another starting arm would really help them out. I think that's a good thing for the Toronto Blue Jays. And results for the Guardians, of course, not as much. The Guardians are a bubbling 500 team. The odds are this move was going to happen if this was the standpoint by the trade deadline. If they were 10 games above 500, it'd probably be a totally different story. They're probably competing for the division title with the Detroit Tigers, but that's certainly not the case. Obviously, I think this is going to benefit Toronto. I think it's a good move, and I think they're going to pull off the AL East title. I even said that in the 2060 yesterday. I think this trade deadline really was all about the Toronto Blue Jays. They also acquired Sir Anthony Dominguez from the Baltimore Orioles. Baltimore Orioles obviously not really doing a fire sale, but they are selling off some key guys, and that's within the division, which is interesting, but the Orioles aren't winning the division anyway, so that move makes sense if you are the Toronto Blue Jays and the Baltimore Orioles overall. Will it really result in anything significant? I'm not so sure. I don't think that's as big of a deal as the Shane Bieber move has been for the Toronto Blue Jays, but to me, I think this puts the Toronto Blue Jays in position to win the AL East. The New York Yankees are the only team I think that will come close to them and have a shot at winning this division if it's not the Blue Jays. But that's my feeling on that. They got to take advantage of Aaron Judge actually not being available right now, and I think they will. I think they're going to catch up, and it's going to be a good situation for the Toronto Blue Jays. All right, let's take a look now at the New York Yankees, as we're going to go down the standings here when we go through the trade deadline pieces. I have them all listed off in order here. That way we know where each team stands. The New York Yankees, an okay trade deadline, I think, for the most part. I don't think it was super duper special. To me, it's going to be on the loss of Aaron Judge. Really, that's what it comes down to for me when you're the New York Yankees. I don't know if it's necessarily a huge move. A lot of folks are grading their trade deadline as spot on, and maybe they're from New York. But to me, none of these moves really are that significant. I mean, Ryan McMahon from Colorado, is that really a huge move if you're the Yankees? I don't think so. Ahmed Rosario, I mean, here in Cleveland, we know the Ahmed Rosario saga already. An okay player. Don't think that's necessarily going to be a game changer. He's an infielder. Jake Bird from Colorado. No, I don't see that really game changing anything. They do need bullpen help. They need some arms, in all honesty. I think pitching is where the New York Yankees' biggest weakness is. They do have Giancarlo Stanton back. That should help them out a little bit in terms of some offensive production. But granted, he didn't have a great regular season last year. He had an okay regular season and a great postseason. Speaking of the Guardians again, I can tell you that from the series we played with them in the ALCS. So Giancarlo Stanton might be helpful at a bat. Jazz Chisholm Jr., he has okay home run numbers, but he's not the guy that Aaron Judge is. They need Aaron Judge back. And I don't know if anyone saw that horrific play that was made by Anthony Volpe yesterday. The New York Yankees continue to really put him out there, and I don't even think he's that good. So the Yankees, to me, I don't see any spectacular moves that they made that really are going to put them over the edge. I know a lot of folks think they did a great job. I don't. And I think the Toronto Blue Jays are really going to be getting the crown in the AL East this year. The Yankees are probably still going to be a wild card team. I wouldn't doubt that. But they need Aaron Judge back. I think Aaron Judge being gone for a big chunk of the season is really going to hurt them. All right, the Boston Red Sox. Nothing spectacular. You'd think for a team that's kind of bubbling above 500 significantly by about 10 games. I think it's 9 games above 500 now. That might be 60-51, 60-52 around there. I don't have the exact standings in front of me. I only have the deadline moves. So Dustin May and Steven Matz are the big moves. Nothing significant at all if you're the Boston Red Sox. I don't know. This team, I think, underachieved really in the middle of the season, but then came back and started getting to the form I thought they would be at. I had the Boston Red Sox competing for the division title this year. And so far, that really hasn't come to fruition. The Toronto Blue Jays have exceeded my expectations. But to me, the Boston Red Sox moves, nothing significant really sticking out to me here. I don't know if this is a good trade deadline for them. And we'll see what it ends up panning into. But to me, the Boston Red Sox, they're already pretty much standing pat of where they are. They necessarily didn't need to make that many moves, to be honest with you. But it comes down to regular season performance at this point. If they can have a good last part of the season here, I think they'll be just fine. But granted, they didn't make any additional moves for a team that's significantly above 500. You think they'd do something, but they really didn't, in all honesty. So the Boston Red Sox, I think, are going to be behind the Yankees and the Toronto Blue Jays in that division. So we'll see how that pans out. But nothing significant coming out of the Boston Red Sox. All right, the Tampa Bay Rays. Griffin Jacks from Minnesota. Obviously, Minnesota doing their huge fire sale. They got Taj Bradley, Jose Calabero from New York. The Yankees gave him them for Everson Pereira. And the 3-team trade with L.A. and Cincy. Zach Little to Cincinnati. Paul Gervase, right-handed pitcher. He will be going to Tampa. He's going to Cincinnati. Ben Rortvedt. I actually haven't watched too many games with Ben Rortvedt in it, but he's going to the L.A. Dodgers. And then Brian Van Bell is coming from Cincinnati to Tampa Bay, and they're a team that's kind of bubbling. And Danny Jansen was traded to Milwaukee. Milwaukee could actually probably use that move. I don't see anything significant for the Rays here either. They're already a middle of the pack team. They've gotten hot at times, but they've also been one of the dumber teams in Major League Baseball. There's a lot of games they should have won and they blew. One of them was actually against the Baltimore Orioles, who we're going to talk about here in a minute, where they were up 6-0 and then lost 22-8. I mean, that's just the kind of team the Rays are. They've made a lot of dumb mistakes this year. Kevin Cash is still a great manager, and I think the Rays have kind of overachieved from what I expected them to do this year. I had them in last place in the division, and they're playing in a AAA ballpark. So, to me, I don't really think the Tampa Bay Rays are anything super-duper special, but these moves, to me, don't really say too much about them either. I don't think they've gotten any great additions that are going to put them over the top. I certainly don't think they're as good as the Red Sox, let alone the Yankees or the Blue Jays. So to me, I think the Boston Red Sox, not the Boston Red Sox, pardon me, the Tampa Bay Rays are going to be standing pat exactly where they are. Moving on to the Baltimore Orioles now. Ryan O'Hearn went to San Diego with Ramon Laureano for Boston Bateman, Brandon Butterworth, and Kyle Hightower. A lot of prospects here. Those are some big names. I think that's going to make San Diego a little bit better than it does Baltimore. Sir Anthony Dominguez, obviously going in the division to Toronto, is kind of a big deal for the Blue Jays. I think that's a decent player there for them to get. Gregory Soto went to the New York Mets, not Juan Soto. Gregory Soto is going to the New York Mets from the Baltimore Orioles. Another decent pitcher there that they could use in the pen. Well, Wellington Aracena and prospect Cameron Foster, who are coming up as well. Those are going to be going to Baltimore now, so we'll see if they are able to do anything with those prospects. Other than that, that's been pretty much the big significant things for the Baltimore Orioles, a team that's really underachieved this year. I don't see the Baltimore Orioles being super duper special in terms of finishing out this upcoming year, especially because they still have a lot of talent on that roster. But to me, the season started off really bad and it never really took off. And for a team that's below 500, but honestly, I think it's 10 games under 500, really. I mean, they should be a lot better than that, but I still see them being a team that wins probably 70 to 80 games this year. I think they could catch up and at least bubble around 500. A very underachieving baseball team this year, the Baltimore Orioles. And selling off some of their pieces doesn't surprise me, but I think their future is brighter than their past in this year. The Baltimore Orioles have a lot of talent in that farm system. They have a lot of talent in their lineup. It's just about figuring it all out. They had a managerial change this year. It's just kind of been a mess for them. So, for me personally, I'm not so sure that does too much for the Baltimore Orioles, obviously. I think they're going to stand pat at where they are in last place. But those moves make sense for some of the other teams. The Detroit Tigers, this is kind of surprising. They didn't really make any real splashy moves. Kind of an average trade deadline for them. They're kind of standing pat where they are, even though they've really, really struggled in recent weeks. But we can go over some of these moves. Special pitcher Charlie Morton was acquired from Baltimore in exchange for Micah Oshman. Paul Sewald, obviously, coming from the Guardians, and Paul Sewald has kind of had an up and down year. He's had some good moments for the Guardians. He's definitely had his bad moments as well. So I don't think the Guardians moving off of Paul Sewald is too big of a deal. The Tigers getting him, you're going to get an inconsistent bullpen guy. So I don't know what that means. It's a within-division trade, another unusual thing here. But at the same time, I think both of these teams know where they stand, so the move may make sense by the end of the year. Matt Manning to Philly for another prospect, an outfielder prospect. Interesting move there, too. I don't think that's really a big impactful one, too. But the Detroit Tigers for essentially about to be running away with the American League Central. I still think they're going to run away with it, even though they're kind of in the middle of a really tough stretch. I think the Tigers are going to finish it out and be just fine. But granted, these moves really don't say anything about them trying to win a World Series. It just seems like they're really trying to win the division and maybe go on a playoff run. They went on a decent run last year that people have been saying until this collapse, they've probably been the best team in baseball since last year. If you look at the second half of last year and then all of this year up until their recent struggles, you could look at the Detroit Tigers and make that case that they have been. I mean, Torkelson's had a much better year this year. Kerry Carpenter, we know what he can do, especially against really good closing pitchers like Emmanuel Clase in the playoffs, but we don't need to talk about that right now because we already know what that Clase situation is. We'll react to that later on. Also, when you look at a guy like Tarek Skubal headlining your rotation, you should expect a lot more out of the Detroit Tigers than you've been getting. So, to me, that is a big thing, but still, that is something I'm not too sure about when it comes to the Detroit Tigers. They've had an okay trade deadline, if anything. To me, I think they're going to be just fine. They didn't really need to make that many moves. What is the Guardians' record thus far? The Guardians' record thus far is 55-54. They're one game above 500. They are fighting for a wild card playoff spot right now. They are the second place team. I believe they're the second place team in the AL Central, behind Detroit by about 8 or 9 games. It's going to be really hard for them to catch up to the Detroit Tigers. They can get back into the wild card conversation, but it's going to be really tough. And they made some difficult trades. I personally think they're going to be on the outside looking in when it comes to the postseason this year, but anything could happen. I think they're about a 500 team, though. We'll talk about the Guardians when we get to them here in just a second. As the Guardians moves, as we get to them here, there's some good grades for them, but I don't think they're that good. I think they're kind of a fire sale. Not really a fire sale. They didn't go nuts and sell a lot of their players off to other teams, but they did trade Shane Bieber, obviously, to Toronto. They're getting Cal Steven, a prospect, a special pitching prospect in return. Cal Steven, excuse me. I haven't seen too much of his film. I've heard good things about him from friends who actually like the move for the future, and if you're thinking of 2026, that could be a good thing. If you're thinking of 2025, that's a terrible move because Shane Bieber is a guy that can eat up innings, probably do what he typically used to do. I mean, as I said, I don't think you're going to get the vintage Shane Bieber, but you're going to get a good Shane Bieber when he gets back on the hill and pitches. But seeing that he's a stable starting rotation pitcher, to me, if you have Shane Bieber, you're having him for the playoffs. That's why I think Toronto wanted him and traded for him, because Toronto is trying to fight and win the whole darn thing because they think they have a shot to do that. I don't think the Guardians believe that. If the Guardians believe they had a shot, Shane Bieber is still on this roster. He's not. So the Guardians, to me, they're not packing up shop and saying 2025 is done. They're going to fight for that wild card spot. They're going to see if they can go on some sort of late season run. The schedule's very easy. They probably could. I don't think they're gonna. But this move to me makes sense for both parties. It makes sense for the Guardians when you're thinking of 2026. It makes sense for the Toronto Blue Jays when you're thinking of them making a playoff run in 2025. The future looks bright for the Guardians with this move. Granted, the organization is still pitiful when it comes to spending money, so I doubt that's going to turn into really anything significant. But if you want to look at a brighter future, the Guardians could be better for this move, certainly. The Paul Sewald trade, to me, doesn't really affect us much. If it even affects Detroit, to be quite honest with you, and I just talked about Detroit, a team that's winning this division right now, probably easily should win this division despite their late season woes. Yeah, I think that's going to be a big time thing. I think if the Detroit Tigers right now, you didn't really make many moves, are you really competing for a World Series is their question. I don't know if they are based on their trade deadline moves, but if they're competing to win this division and make some sort of a playoff run, I think that's what they're doing. They could win the World Series. I could be totally wrong. They could absolutely go and win the World Series, but to me, they weren't overly aggressive in this trade deadline, so I don't believe they're going to win the World Series, but I definitely believe they're going to be one of the top teams. And if you look at what the Guardians did, kind of getting off their, hopefully who would be their best starting pitcher if he were to have pitched for us, which he's not, then you think the Guardians definitely got worse. But then you also have to look around the division. Kansas City, the Royals, they're a bubbling 500 team right now. They have some good players. Bobby Witt Jr. in the lineup, Salvador Perez, Vinny Pasquantino. You look at guys like that, and you know they have the bats. They have good starting pitchers like Seth Lugo as well, and Michael Lorenzen is an okay guy. Chris Bubich is a good pitcher for you as well. But the Royals, when you look at their trade deadline moves, Randall Grichuk from Arizona for Andrew Hoffman. Arizona, the Diamondbacks, also kind of went on a fire sale. They have tons of offensive talent, but absolutely no pitching whatsoever, and they're not going to be able to compete with teams like the Padres or even close to the Dodgers. So the Diamondbacks kind of fire sailing a lot of their players as well at the deadline. So Randall Grichuk, an outfielder for them, he's going to be with the Kansas City Royals. That's a nice addition for them. I actually like Kansas City now to probably finish higher than the Cleveland Guardians in the standings because of some of these moves. The Guardians, to me, they're a bubbling 500 team. I think the Royals flip the script the second half of the season, and they end up getting some pretty impressive wins throughout the remainder of what's left in baseball. And I think they're a team we may see in October. If we see them in October, they might be on the outside looking in still. But to me, the Kansas City Royals showed me at this trade deadline they're definitely more interested in making a run late this year than the Cleveland Guardians seem to be. But granted, the Guardians, too, they got that big win yesterday with Kyle Manzardo getting the walk-off. Hunter Gaddis kind of blew it at the end. It could have been a 2-0 game. Ended up being a 3-2 win for the Guardians. We'll take it. And that leads me to the Minnesota Twins and the disastrous trade deadline they had. The Minnesota Twins essentially were a fire sale. They moved off of Juan Duran. He's going to the Philadelphia Phillies. that easily makes the Phillies better. And in return, Micah Bell and Eduardo Tate are going to the Minnesota Twins, and they're just some prospects. They're not really guys you're going to see consistently. I mean, they're younger guys, obviously, guys that aren't playing too much. Is that a fair trade-off? I guess the future will tell, but if the Philadelphia Phillies end up making a run and winning the World Series this year, the Juan Duran move is going to be something they look at, because I think that's significant if you're the Philadelphia Phillies. And he's a pitcher you definitely like to have, especially because he's a closer and he knows what the hell he's doing. He's a decent closer. He's not Emmanuel Clase good. Brandon Emmanuel Clase probably won't be playing baseball ever again, but still, Juan Duran, a good closing pitcher, and the Phillies have him at their disposal. I would watch out for the Phillies. They're competing with the Mets for that division crown. That's going to come down to the wire, I think, especially with a move like that. The Phillies are all in, and the Mets have shown they're all in as well. Carlos Correa, that's another move. He's going to the Houston Astros, and the Astros, outside of the cheating scandal, have been a good organization in recent years, and they made the right moves at the deadline and show they're always willing to compete. That shows it. Salary relief is coming in return to the Minnesota Twins, which is essentially what they did at this deadline anyway. So, to me, when you look at all these moves, so many disastrous things they could have done. Willie Castro's gone. Brock Stewart's gone. Some of their pitching staff is gone. The Twins are also up for sale right now. So, essentially, that is not going to help Minnesota at all, because who knows what the new regime is going to be. And with all these changes, is this all cash cutting measures to sell the team? Is this, we're not competing anyway, so let's just get rid of everybody? I mean, I don't know. The Minnesota Twins had the worst trade deadline of anybody. I question what direction they're going as an organization. Are they in full-on tank mode, or are they in we're going to compete next year mode? I don't know. To me, the Twins have shown me nothing that leads me to believe they have a bright future at all. They're a fire sale right now and up for sale, so we'll see what the heck they do in the future. To me, the Minnesota Twins, by far the worst trade deadline, and it's because they sold everything off, and that was organizationally their decision, so it's on them to figure that out. But yeah, the Minnesota Twins, to me, definitely the team making the most noise for being bad, and rightfully so. You look at the White Sox moves. Now, they're the worst team in the division by far. Minnesota might be coming for them after all the moves they made, not this year, but maybe in the future. But you look at the White Sox, Adrian Hauser is going to Tampa Bay and Austin Slater to New York. Nothing that's going to really impact their season. It's been a disaster. The White Sox still have a long way to go before those moves really make a huge impact. There's still talks that this is like a 15-year rebuild for them, and it very well may be, because the White Sox were putrid last year, and they're still not very good. They have a long way to go, even based on how they're currently constructed. But the Minnesota Twins might be coming for them for that bottom spot in the Central. Even the Guardians, by far, are better than those two teams. I'll say that right off the rip. The Mariners made some great moves this deadline as well. They are really trying to compete, but they're not a great organization when it comes to spending either. So these moves are definitely, I think, helpful for them, but a lot of them are probably some rentals. Josh Naylor, our former Josh Naylor here in Cleveland, he is now a Seattle Mariner. So we won the trade already. Slade Ciccone has been okay for the Guardians. Has some ace material in him. Will he be the future ace? It certainly doesn't look like it's Tanner Bybee, so it could be Slade Ciccone. Maybe that ends up panning out for the Guardians. Granted, seeing how he's done this year, that's clearly a win for the Guardians, because Arizona sold off Josh Naylor already. He's going to be with the Seattle Mariners. And the Mariners making the right move because they are trying to compete with the Astros for that division title. They're trying to compete for a top wild card spot. They're right in the thick of things. The Seattle Mariners were pretty aggressive in this trade deadline, and they made some good moves because they really do have a shot. They could win the division. They might not. I don't think they will. I still think the Astros are a little bit better than them. But Suarez also coming from Arizona, third baseman. Another good move for them, another offensive piece that they need. The Mariners, the biggest question about them in the offseason was the offense. It was never the starting rotation. The offense has actually been a lot better for them than I think people expected. But these two moves right here for Suarez and Naylor, that's going to be big. And I think the Mariners are going to be a much better baseball team because of that. And they're kind of just taking off the Diamondbacks' good offensive performances they had this year. If the Diamondbacks had some pitching, at the very least, they'd probably be a lot better because there's so many games the Diamondbacks lost that were like 11-10, 14-12. They scored a ton of runs, and now the Mariners are going to be able to reap kind of off that. if these guys end up panning out and having a great rest of the season, which I think they will. Josh Naylor, we saw in Cleveland, definitely is a top performer. Now, in the postseason, what you get out of Josh Naylor is still the big question mark. Suarez, a good addition for them as well. Offensively, the Seattle Mariners, the last part of the season, should be a much better baseball team. The Texas Rangers, nothing significant for them. I still think they're just an okay baseball team. Are they still kind of in a World Series title hangover? Maybe. They have a great manager. They have good players like Corey Seager. I mean, but still, to me, they're not anything special this year. Merrill Kelly coming from Arizona, but for more prospects they're trading away. Is that an okay move? I guess so. I don't know. The Rangers don't really seem like a serious team right now. It's hard to take them seriously, especially they won the World Series a few years ago. We should be taking them a lot more seriously than we are, but it's hard to do so. They're not playing like a good baseball team should, and they haven't been consistent. They have a lot of good players, but that World Series hangover may be just drifting off. They have a great manager. They have a decent lineup, but there's a lot of problems with the Texas Rangers right now, and they're just not a consistent baseball team at the end of the day. LA Angels, obviously nothing too special here either. Better baseball team than I thought they'd be this year. I thought they were on pace to lose like 115, 116 games. It certainly looks like they're going to be well short of that. But nothing really significant here either to say that they're going to be really competing. And to be honest with you, based on some of the acquired players they have for prospects, I'm not so sure that's going to make the difference in the world. So not really much to talk about when it comes to the Angels outside of Mike Trout, when Mike Trout's healthy, of course. The New York Mets, let's move to the National League, and then the Athletics too. I mean, they moved off of J.P. Sears. He's going to San Diego. Mason Miller. Those are some good players. The Athletics maybe got better in terms of prospects, but their future is still long down the line. The National League now. Let's go on to the New York Mets. Some big moves. Gregory Soto, we talked about how Baltimore moved off him. They traded some prospects for him. That's going to be a good pitching addition for the New York Mets. Tyler Rogers will be as well. He was coming from the Giants. And Ryan Helsley, he's coming from St. Louis. Another decent pick, I think. I think the Mets really need bullpen pitching, and I think this really helps their cause. Is it the best bullpen in baseball? No, but it's pretty depth. It might be. It's up there. It's getting better, and that's been their biggest issue this year, really, has been the bullpen, because you have Lindor, Pete Alonso, and those guys on the offense, now Juan Soto, and you could light it up and have a great October, but those three guys right there is going to really create some more depth in the bullpen, and I think that's something that the New York Mets absolutely need right now because they showed some bullpen woes throughout the season. So I think the Mets had a great trade deadline, and I will still say the Mets are World Series contenders. They got close last year to making it, fell just short like the Guardians did. We'll see what the Mets pan out and do. But the Mets right now, first place in the East. They're competing with the Phillies, and they got to watch out for the Phillies because the Phillies have been pretty aggressive at the trade deadline too, getting Juan Duran, the closing pitcher for Minnesota. That's a big move for them. That's going to help them significantly, and they're going to be right in the thick of it with the New York Mets. It's going to be a really close finish for which one of these teams ends up being the best team in all of the NL East. I think it's going to be the Mets because of their bullpen primarily, but the Phillies are coming too, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Phillies make a great playoff run as well, and we see those teams really get down to the nitty-gritty of things in the postseason. The Miami Marlins, they're a team that's bubbling 500 that I'm surprised is bubbling 500, but they are, nevertheless, and they still made just okay moves, nothing significant. They got outfielder Matthew Etzel from Tampa Bay for Nick Fortes, the catcher. Jesus Sanchez is going to Houston for Ryan Gusto and prospect Valencia, and shortstop Jaworski, I believe his name is. I'm still kind of bad with pronouncing the prospect names. Excuse me on that. The Marlins are bubbling 500, so, I think they should be more aggressive, but we know how the Marlins are. They're not going to be. If you're the Miami Marlins, as putrid as you've been as an organization over the last 20 years, you should expect better moves at the trade deadline if you want to be respectable. But the Marlins, they just do okay moves. It looks like they have a brighter future now than they did. To me, the Marlins are kind of on the borderline of the National League wild card. I would be competing for something. They're still below 500, but they're bubbling 500 and possibly could be above it. So the fact the Marlins aren't more aggressive is a dang shame, but maybe this pans out for them in 2026. You just never know. But moves for more prospects, Typical Miami Marlins fashion, no surprise there. If they finish above 500 this year, I'd still be stunned. But right now they're bubbling 500, and it's been a lot more impressive. They beat the Yankees yesterday, 13-12. So their offense can light it up against a good offense like the Yankees. Granted, with no Judge, but still, their offense can light it up at times. So the Miami Marlins do deserve some credit there. The Atlanta Braves, not really anything significant either. The Braves should be a lot better than they've been. They've been really a disaster, and this year in particular, they should be a lot better than this. Their lineup shows it. Obviously, Acuna Jr. has had some health stuff over the last few years that's kind of impacted some of the way the season's gone. It didn't impact the World Series year, but that's been a big thing for them. Pitching-wise, I mean, they had guys like Strider at one point. Their pitching this year hasn't been as the same. A good organization and one of the top organizations in baseball the last few years. So to see them have kind of a disappointing trade deadline is a surprise. But granted, they still got a long way to go. They got Eric Fetty from St. Louis, which is not necessarily a horrible move. And what's left of Cookie Carrasco. And as much as I love Cookie Carrasco from his time here in Cleveland, I don't know if that's going to move any kind of needle for the Atlanta Braves. They're the fourth place team in this division. I really think the Miami Marlins have surpassed them at this point. I don't see any moves the Braves made that make them significantly better. The Nationals, decent for the future. Again, nothing that's going to impact them in 2025. All this stuff is prospects and guys that, like Ahmed Rosario going to the Yankees. Like, that's not really going to help them. That's just a trade that's, even if he stayed on the roster, that's not going to make a big impact. So, to me, that's all prospect stuff. The Nationals, based on the number of prospects they have, and if they all develop within the farm system, could have a fantastic 2026 and 27. But who knows? The Nationals are also kind of coming off a World Series hangover from 6 years ago. So, granted, the Nationals still have some time to really rebuild and tool up and be a good organization once again in the future. The Milwaukee Brewers. Now, these moves are questionable as well, but the Brewers have been probably the hottest team in baseball since the start of July, and they've shown it. Do I think they're better than the Cubs? I still question that. I think the Cubs end up winning the division nevertheless, but the Milwaukee Brewers have played well. Bottom line is they're a cheap organization. Getting Shelby Miller, to me, doesn't seem impressive, a right-handed pitcher like Shelby Miller. Nestor Cortez, really? Is that going to really change the world for you? Nestor Cortez is an okay pitcher. He's not great, but he's an okay pitcher. I don't think that's going to really move any needles for the Milwaukee Brewers. And then Danny Jansen from Tampa Bay as a catcher could end up panning out, may not, but these are cheap moves. If you're the Milwaukee Brewers, you should be getting guys like Josh Naylor on the roster. Like, get guys that have been proven bats. Like, that's what Seattle's doing right now. The Milwaukee Brewers don't fight for that kind of stuff because they're a cheap organization like the Guardians. And I think if they make the postseason this year, you're going to see a first-round exit in the wild card or in the divisional series in a sweep or a 2 or 3 game series in the wild card. The Milwaukee Brewers are not a serious organization. I don't take them seriously. These moves are stupid, and to me, they're just playing with house money with what they have. What they have is not good enough to win a World Series. Maybe a division. But I still think the Cubs are going to beat them out. And the Cubs didn't even have a great trade deadline either. I mean, Mike Soroka, okay. Taylor Rogers, okay. From Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh's always a fire sale, please. The Cubs didn't have a great trade deadline either. This division, you necessarily don't have to have a great trade deadline in the NL Central because all the teams usually are terrible, and it's just about which team is the least not terrible. It's shown to be the Milwaukee Brewers in recent years. It's shown to be the Milwaukee Brewers right now. The Chicago Cubs are bordering them. I think the Cubs spent enough money where they should overtake the Brewers at some point. But this is an easy division to win. There should be no issues for either the Cubs or the Brewers to win the division, but to go on any postseason runs, that's a laughable thought. Neither one of those teams are going to go far. I like the Cubs a lot. I think the Matthew Boyd signing is an indictment on the Cleveland Guardians because the Guardians should have brought him back after they almost went to the World Series last year. But, you know, the Guardians like to cut costs too, just like the Milwaukee Brewers. The Chicago Cubs have shown in the past they don't do that, but still there's question marks about the Cubs' consistency right now, and I can see why. And not impressive moves at the trade deadline by an organization like the Cubs, who are known for making aggressive moves at the trade deadline. The Cincinnati Rebs, they got Hayes from Pittsburgh, Taylor Rogers, and then the 3-team trade, obviously, with the Rays and the Angels. I mean, not the Angels, I'm sorry, the Dodgers. The Los Angeles Dodgers, pardon me. And Miguel Andujar is coming to Cincinnati for Kenya Huggins. So yeah, that's okay moves again. Better for the future, sure. Cincinnati Reds aren't going anywhere this year. I think they've made steps in the right direction to be a respectable organization, and that has to do with former Guardians manager Terry Francona taking the helm in Cincinnati. St. Louis, Ryan Helsley to New York. Obviously, that makes the New York Yankees better, but that makes the New York Mets better. I'm looking at the wrong New York team. Pardon me. That obviously makes the Mets better, but to me, St. Louis is one of those teams that should be a lot better than what they are, and are constantly underachieving in the last few years. A few years ago, the Cardinals were in the playoffs. They were making aggressive moves to try to compete in the playoffs and didn't. They ended up losing in the wild card round, but still, it's always better when the St. Louis Cardinals are good at baseball because they're a small market. They're a historical organization. They're second in the Yankees in World Series titles. I wish the Cardinals would make better moves than what they make at the trade deadline right now because it's always better for baseball when St. Louis is good. That's just my opinion. But for right now, nothing significant at all for them. And they're going to probably stand pat. They're going to probably stand pat at the 3 or the 4 spot in the Central. The Pittsburgh Pirates, awful trade deadline, fire sale, getting rid of everybody like they always do. Bednar is going to the Yankees. Hayes is going to Cincinnati. Taylor Rogers to Chicago. A fire sale. The Pirates should be ashamed of themselves as an organization for always being as bad as they are and never taking the talent that they always have, because they always have good talent. O'Neal Cruz, great baseball player. Paul Skeens, great baseball player. But they're playing for the Pittsburgh Pirates. What are they ever going to win? The pitching rotation is decent with the Pittsburgh Pirates, but they don't have a bullpen. They don't have a good lineup outside of O'Neal Cruz, and so they're essentially the Cleveland Browns of baseball. If you're in Pittsburgh right now, wait for the Steelers season to start. Wait for the Penguins season to start. Don't watch the Pirates. They're a crapshoot every year, and it's disappointing and a disgrace because the Pittsburgh Pirates have a great ballpark. They have a solid fan base. We know that Pittsburgh fans are loyal. A lot of fans even for Pittsburgh here in Ohio. The Pirates, not the Steelers, but the Pirates. It's a darn shame that they're always as bad as they are. It really, really is. They haven't won a World Series since 1979. They haven't really competed for a World Series in over 25 years. I don't want to hear anything good about the Pirates as an organization. It's a darn shame. They should be a lot better. And their organization chooses to always cut costs and waste good talent. The Dodgers didn't really necessarily need to have a great trade deadline because we know what they bring. They got Brock Stewart from Minnesota. I think that's a really good move for them. Dustin May is going to Boston for James Tibbs and Zach Earnhardt in the farm system. Those prospects could be promising in the future for the Dodgers. But really, when you have Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman and Yoshinobu Yamamoto, do you really need to have a great trade deadline? I don't think so. You're already coming off a World Series championship. You might be on the verge of another. The Dodgers are just fine. The Giants, it's okay. Nothing significant. They're a good baseball team as is. Did they really need to make too many moves? I think you had to be a little bit more aggressive when you're competing with the Dodgers, but not much when you can do, like I said, when you have Yamamoto, Ohtani, and Freddie Freeman. So the Giants, to me, standing pat essentially of what they have, all for prospects. They're focusing on the future. They're okay with and complacent with being good this year, but they're not necessarily looking for the championship this year is the best way to put that, or making a huge playoff run. The Padres, Mason Miller, a good move. Ryan O'Hearn, a good move. I like the Padres a lot. Obviously, they have guys like Gavin Sheets in their lineup, who a lot of times bats 6th or 7th. And if you have Gavin Sheets batting 6th or 7th in your lineup, then you're a really good baseball team. So, to me, the Padres, they're not as good as the Dodgers. These moves are going to help them, but it's going to depend on what takes place with the Padres in the long run, because they still lost in 5 games to the Dodgers last year, and I don't know if they're nearly as good as they were last year to even compete with the Dodgers in that realm. So we'll see what takes place with the Padres. I don't think they're winning the division. It's about making noise in the postseason. Padres came close to it last year and ended up failing. So will it take place this year? Still doubtful. I think the Dodgers are the best team in the National League, above the Mets and the Phillies, even though I think they're all in as well. The Arizona Diamondbacks, good moves for their future with all the prospects they got, but Randall Grichuk is gone, Josh Naylor is gone, Eugenio Suarez is gone. So a lot of their offensive talent off the roster. The Diamondbacks this year, though, have been known for poor pitching because they've lost so many games scoring 10-plus runs. They had like an 11-run inning one time and still lost the game. So the Diamondbacks focusing on the future, getting prospects makes sense. I don't see a chance in hell they really compete for a playoff spot. I think they're a very mediocre team, and I think these moves still make them a very mediocre team, possibly less mediocre. And, you know, when you're playing with the Dodgers and the Giants and the Padres consistently, that's going to be really tough to compete with. The Colorado Rockies game should be easy for you, but that's about it. And you can look at the Colorado Rockies, too. Better team so far than I thought they would be at this part of the season. They're already at 29 wins, so they're probably not going to be as bad as the White Sox were last year, but they're definitely not going to be very good. So Jake Bird is now with the Yankees. An okay move for the Yankees. I don't know how special that's going to be. Ryan McMahon is going to the Yankees as well. An okay move for the Yankees. We'll see what that really pans into. They need Aaron Judge back, as I mentioned. They did some trades for the future, but nothing significant that's going to change their 29-80 record. They're 2 games away from being below 500 yet again. The Rockies are a mess. So nothing there really makes me look at the Rockies and say that they're going to be a world-ending team anytime, even in the near future. They got a long way to go, and they're in a division with the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Giants, and even the Diamondbacks, who are mediocre but have had good offensive talent this past year. No way. The Rockies got a long way to go. There's nothing in the trade deadline that's really stuck out to me about Colorado. They're a disaster. And it's a dang shame. But they're not a good organization. That's what it comes down to. All right. Before we wrap things up here, that's my thoughts on the trade deadline. Emmanuel Clase and the betting scandal that's going on with the Guardians. How big of a deal is that for the Guardians at this trade deadline? In my opinion on that, could have been huge. You could have gotten a haul for Emmanuel Clase, but that gambling scandal, in reality, you know, people are saying he screwed over the Guardians, but in reality, Emmanuel Clase screwed over himself. He's probably never going to play baseball again because of this scandal. Ever. I doubt he steps foot as a pitcher again. So, did he really screw over the Guardians? I don't think so. He screwed over himself and his career, and he screwed over the reputation he had as the best closer in Major League Baseball. That's gone. It's out the window. Emmanuel Clase ruined his own reputation. He ruined his own career. And still, it's an ongoing investigation, so we don't know all the answers yet. But at the end of the day, Emmanuel Clase really screwed over himself, not the Guardians. So if we're going to say he screwed over the Guardians, that's fine. The Guardians could go on and be a respectable organization again in 2026 once this season's over, because, as I said, I believe it's going to be a 500 season the way it looks right now. But the Guardians, as an organization, I think will be fine. It's Emmanuel Clase, who's never going to play baseball again. And I will constantly say this when it comes to sports betting and professional athletes. Now, I'm not a big sports bettor. I encourage responsible sports gambling. You can't be an idiot when it comes to sports betting. I want to emphasize that. Responsible sports betting is important. But I'm not a sports bettor. I don't do it. It's not my thing. I know a lot of people that do. They enjoy it. They have fun with it. They do it responsibly, that kind of thing. I understand that. If you're going to sports bet responsibly, totally get it. But if you're a professional athlete and you're already making millions of dollars, what's the point? You're going to throw your whole career away, possibly, at sports betting to make more money for the millions you're already going to be making. You make more money to produce on the field or on the court or whatever sport it is. You make more money doing that than you ever would on a sports bet. Most people dream of being a professional athlete. A lot of folks dream of being a professional athlete. You're going to throw it all away to bet? It's unbelievable, and it impacts the sport in a negative way. If you were doing safe sports gambling as a fan, I totally get that. But if you're a professional athlete and you're already making millions, there's no reason to do so. That's just my opinion on the matter. And Emmanuel Clase, in the long run, didn't screw over the Guardians. Sure, it may seem like that based on the trade deadline, but he didn't screw over the Guardians like he screwed over himself. A great professional athlete like Emmanuel Clase, who had all this respect, it's possibly going to be all out the window after this Major League Baseball investigation is concluded because of sports betting, something incredibly stupid for a professional athlete to do. So that's my opinion on the matter. And the same thing goes for Luis Ortiz. Now, Luis Ortiz wasn't a consistent pitcher. He had his highs and his lows, but all out the window now. Will he ever play baseball again becomes the question. You can't sports bet like that. You just can't if you're a professional athlete. You just can't. I always encourage safe and responsible sports gambling. But if you're a professional athlete, that's a ridiculous consideration. And that's my opinion on that. That's going to be it for today's edition of Raw Takes Live. We will be back next week with a new edition. We're going to be right here on Facebook Live again. Make sure to stay tuned. We really appreciate it if you tuned in today. Shout out to everyone who did join, including my mom, Heather Hody, who made some of those comments. Always feel free to comment, reach out to us on our Facebook pages as well. This video will be up on YouTube soon as well, so you can watch it there. If you want to rewind it, obviously on my timeline too, you can check it out too. So, really appreciate your time today. We'll talk some more football next week as training camps are really going to be underway. But that's my thoughts on Major League Baseball, where all the teams currently stand, and the trade deadline, along with the big news on Emmanuel Clase. Have a good one, everybody. We'll see you next week.